don't take Greenland, Russia or China will take Greenland, and I am not going to let that happen.
I cannot imagine, nor do I want to speculate, that a NATO country would attack.
Om et NATO-land skulle angribe det.
So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult way.
January 3rd, 2026. The United States invades Venezuela and captures its president. January 5th, President Trump says taking Greenland by military force is an option. January 12th, Trump declares, one way or the other, we're going to have Greenland. January 14th, 6 NATO countries, Germany, Sweden, France, Norway, Netherlands, and Finland deployed troops to Greenland to stand alongside Denmark. Let that sink in. NATO allies are sending soldiers to protect a member nation, not from Russia, not from China, from the United States of America. For 75 years, America built alliances. We protected our friends. We stood for something called the rules-based international order. In less than 2 weeks, all of that is unraveling. This isn't about Venezuela anymore. This is about whether America has become the threat it once protected the world from. Let's talk about how the world is reacting, because the answer should terrify you. Greenland. Population 56,000. The world's largest island, a Danish territory since 1814, and now the center of the biggest crisis in NATO's 76-year history. President Trump has made his position clear. On January 12th, he told reporters, one way or the other, we're going to have Greenland. We're talking about acquiring, not leasing, not having it short-term. When asked if military force was on the table, he didn't say no. He said Denmark's defense consists of 2 dog sleds. That's a lie, but it's a revealing one. Here's what actually happened on January 14th. Denmark announced it was reinforcing its military presence in Greenland. Within hours, 6 other NATO countries joined them. Germany sent 13 military personnel for reconnaissance. Sweden deployed troops at Denmark's request. Norway, France, Netherlands, Finland, all sending forces to participate in joint exercises. This is unprecedented. NATO allies are positioning themselves to potentially defend against the United States. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen was blunt. Any U.S. military action against Greenland would mean the end of NATO. Let me say that again. The end of NATO? Because America threatened to invade a member state. Here's something Stephen Miller, Trump's top aide, probably didn't know when he said nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over Greenland. Denmark has a royal decree from 1952. It's still in force, and it says this: Danish military units have a duty to defend Danish territory if it is subjected to an armed attack, including by taking immediate defensive action if required. The Danish Defense Command confirmed this to reporters. If American forces attack Greenland, Danish soldiers are required, by law, to shoot back. Think about what that means. American troops firing on Danish troops. A NATO ally fighting a NATO ally. Article 5, the Mutual Defense Clause that says an attack on one is an attack on all, suddenly meaningless because the attacker is the alliance's leader. Denmark isn't backing down. Defense Minister Troels Lund Poulsen announced 88 billion Danish kroner, that's $13.8 billion, for rearming Greenland. He cited what he called the serious security situation we find ourselves in. The serious security situation from America. This is the first time in NATO's history that the United States has been listed as a security threat by an ally. Venezuela wasn't an isolated incident. It was day one of something bigger. In the 72 hours after Maduro's capture, President Trump threatened or made claims against 6 more countries. Let me list them. Colombia. Trump called President Petro a sick man who likes making cocaine. When asked about invading, he said, "Sounds good to me." Cuba. After the operation killed 32 Cuban military officers in Venezuela, Secretary Rubio said, "If I lived in Havana right now, I'd be very concerned." Mexico. Trump said cartels are running Mexico and announced, "We're going to start hitting land." Panama. The administration demanded control of the canal, citing Chinese influence. Greenland. Military takeover declared an option. Iran. Locked and loaded and ready to go. That's 7 countries threatened in less than a week. Some are adversaries, some are rivals, but some, Denmark, Colombia, Mexico, are supposed to be allies. Trump has renamed the Monroe Doctrine after himself, the Don Roe Doctrine, and its message is simple: this hemisphere belongs to us, and we'll take what we want. The Brookings Institution called it out. Trump resuscitated the Monroe Doctrine not to keep the world safe for democracy, but to ensure U.S. access to whatever natural and strategic resources it may need. Not democracy, resources. The rest of the world is watching, and they're not impressed. The United Nations called an Emergency Security Council meeting. Assistant Secretary General Martha Poby said, "This external dimension adds volatility to an already combustible situation." UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged maximum restraint and said concerns are best addressed through diplomacy and dialogue. Russia called it armed aggression, which is rich coming from them, but they're not wrong. China said it was deeply shocked and accused the U.S. of seeking an excuse for territorial expansion. Mexico's President Sheinbaum, quote, "Unilateral invasion cannot be the basis of 21st century international relations." But here's the response that should worry Americans most. The European Union, our closest allies, released a joint statement saying Greenland belongs to its people and only Denmark and Greenland can decide their future. France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and Britain all signed it. Our friends, our partners, our allies for 80 years. They're drawing a line against us. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk warned that NATO would lose its meaning if one member attacked another. Lose its meaning. The alliance that won the Cold War, kept the peace in Europe, responded to 9/11. Gone, because America went rogue. You know who's thrilled about all of this? Beijing and Moscow. For years, the United States told China, "You can't invade Taiwan. International law prohibits it. Sovereignty matters." For years, we told Russia, "You can't take Ukraine. Big countries don't get to swallow smaller ones." Now Xi Jinping can say, "You invaded Venezuela for oil. We're taking Taiwan for security." What's the difference? Now Putin can say, "You call my invasion of Ukraine illegal. You just kidnapped a sitting president." We destroyed our own argument. The moral authority America spent decades building, gone in one night. This isn't whataboutism. This is cause and effect. When you break the rules you wrote, you give everyone else permission to break them too. The Washington Office on Latin America called it a violation of standards that have guided the international order for nearly a century. Nearly a century. Since the League of Nations, since we said never again after World War I. We didn't just invade Venezuela, we told the world that rules don't apply to the powerful. And every dictator on earth is taking notes. Let's talk about what happens if Trump actually does it, if he sends American forces to take Greenland. Article 5 of the NATO treaty says an attack on one member is an attack on all. It's the core promise of the alliance. The only time it was ever invoked was after 9/11, when our allies came to help U.S. If America attacks Greenland, Denmark would have the right to invoke Article 5 against us. Would Europe actually fight America? Probably not militarily. The power imbalance is too extreme. But that's almost beside the point. Senator Chris Murphy put it this way: "If I'm a European NATO member, I would be reassessing my participation in NATO if NATO countries are being invaded by Donald Trump." Reassessing participation. That's diplomatic language for maybe we don't need this alliance anymore. And here's what Trump said when asked about NATO. Remember, they needed the US more than we need them. Maybe that was true once, but if America becomes the threat that NATO was designed to protect against, Europe will build something else. They'll have to. The alliance that kept the peace for 75 years, dying because America decided to become an empire. 200 years ago, Simón Bolívar, the liberator of South America, made a prediction about the United States. He said, "The United States appears to be destined by Providence to plague America with misery in the name of liberty." In the name of liberty. That's exactly what's happening now. The reaction across Latin America has been fierce. Mexico condemned the operation as a violation of the UN Charter. Colombia recalled its ambassador after Trump called President Petro a drug dealer. Brazil's Lula called for regional solidarity. Even countries that hated Maduro are nervous, because if America can do this to Venezuela, they can do it anywhere. The Organization of American States is in crisis. The Rio Treaty, the Hemisphere's mutual defense agreement, now looks like a joke. And here's the thing. Latin America has long memories. They remember the CIA coups, Guatemala, 1954, Chile, 1973, the support for death squads, the School of Americas. They thought maybe that era was over, that America had changed. It hasn't. It's just gotten more brazen. Trump says American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. But dominance isn't the same as leadership. Fear isn't the same as respect. And you can occupy a country, but you can't occupy a continent's memory. For decades, American diplomats talked about the rules-based international order. It was our brand, our promise to the world. The idea was simple. There are rules that apply to everyone. Big and small, rich and poor, the same rules. That was always partly fiction. America has bent and broken rules when it suited us. Iraq, Libya, drone strikes in countries we're not at war with. But we at least pretended. We at least tried to construct legal justifications. We at least acknowledged that rules existed. January 3rd was different. There was no legal pretense, just, we want it, we're taking it. Trump didn't claim self-defense. He didn't get Security Council approval. He didn't even tell Congress first. He told oil executives. The rules-based order isn't injured. It's dead. America killed it with its own hands. And in its place, the law of the jungle. The strong take what they want. Might makes right. That's not leadership. That's not even strategy. It's just power, raw, naked, and ugly. I want to end with a question that should haunt every American. For 75 years, we told ourselves a story. America was the good guy, the defender of freedom, the beacon of democracy, the country that stood for something beyond its own interests. Was that story ever completely true? No. We've done terrible things, but we at least aspired to something better. We at least tried. What are we now? A country that invades without cause, that threatens its own allies, that talks about taking countries and running them, that dismisses international law as something that doesn't apply to us. 6 NATO allies sent troops to Greenland this week, not to fight Russia, to prepare for America. That's not a headline from a dystopian novel. That's the world we live in now. Danish intelligence listed the United States as a security threat for the first time in history because of us. The world is watching what we do, and increasingly they're concluding that America isn't a partner, it's a predator. Is this who we want to be? Is this the country we want to leave our children? Because right now, when the world looks at America, they don't see a defender of freedom. They see the threat. And honestly, can you blame them? When the world looks at America, they don't see a defender of freedom. They see the threat. And honestly, can you blame them?